Well, hello there, kids, and welcome back. My name is Luna, and this is Water Moon Cards. And today I have kind of a weird video for you about a weird deck and some thoughts about creativity and how to learn tarot. So it's just a mishmash of things I've been thinking about, and I thought, since I don't show my face and you can't see my blathering visage on the camera, that I would set this little speech to something more interesting. And I've been wanting to do a walkthrough of this deck anyway, so just putting them together. But there's a certain synergy here, so I think it'll make a certain amount of sense. So, what are we looking at right now? We are looking at the UTarot 2022 deck. And before you ask, no, you can't get it anywhere. This is a very weird thing. It's sort of in the category of tarot as a marketing tool, but it's even more specialized than that because this was not released on the open market, and it wasn't so much used to promote something to get customers to buy into it, but to promote something to make the internal employees feel good about it. And that something is the United Therapeutics Corporation. And that's where the U in UTarot comes from. The box for this is absolutely ginormous. Can't even fit it all in frame. Here's the image. And the book is equally hefty. It's that same image of the grumpy moon on the front. And then the cards, as you can see, are quite large. It's not just your screen. This is a standard tarot size card, and this is UTarot. So more than 2.5 times as large as a standard tarot size. I do use this deck. I shuffle it sideways waterfall style. It works really well. Cards are flexible. And it's a fantastic reader, despite the fact that it was created as a interactive gag gift, I guess, for the board of directors of this company in 2022, and that's why it's called UTarot 2022. It was developed from the work of a famous artist. His name is Ralph Steadman, and you might recognize his art as we go through this. He did the art for the original illustrations of the book Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas by Hunter S. Thompson, and he's done a lot of other art. He's done other commercial art. He also did the logo and art for the Flying Dog Beer Company out of Maryland. And I'm sure he's done other things I'm not aware of. But he's an artist I've always liked and enjoyed. And when I saw this deck on the Instagram of someone I used to follow when I was on Instagram, I really wanted to get a copy. And that was back in 2024, so 2 years after this deck was released to the board of directors, 2 years after it was printed. And fortunately, someone, I guess, decided to sell their copy because it showed up on eBay. So that's how I got my copy. Big shout out and thanks to Olive Slings Cards, because she was the one who turned me on to this. I would not have known that there was a Ralph Steadman tarot deck out in the world if it hadn't been for her. So thank you. As you can see, it does not have traditional labels, titles, or slogans. It has, at the top, sort of tarot-y phrases that relate to the cards, and then at the bottom, it has company-specific nomenclature, terminology, inside jokes, that kind of thing. What's very cool about this, and what helps make it a usable tarot for someone who does not understand the corporate culture of the United Therapeutics Corporation, is that this book that comes with it has kind of explanations of what everything means. These are the first 3 cards, the first 3 major arcana. So we would have the Fool, the Magician, and the High Priestess. And for example, so our Fool card here is labeled Genesis. And if we look that up in the book, we learn that this woman, Genesis Rothblatt's diagnosis of pulmonary arterial hypertension is the reason we started United Therapeutics in 1996. She is an inspiration to us all. You get those kinds of little inside tidbits to make the deck make sense. Now, I have read this deck just on its own with my prior knowledge of tarot and my own intuition, and I've gotten fantastic, very clear readings out of it. So I don't necessarily have all the information about the company memorized, but if I did have a question about it, I have this resource, which is pretty neat. So why am I showing you this deck? Well, I think it's an interesting exercise in creativity and kind of learning how to read tarot. It shakes things up. And so I wanted to talk about those two things. I've been thinking a lot about creativity. I've been having a lot of discussions with people close to me about creativity, to the point that I felt like I kept having the same conversation with multiple people over and over the last, say, I don't know, 6 months to a year. It's been like brewing for a while. So I finally broke down and just made a blog post, a really long blog post about creativity generally and how I view it, and the difference between, say, creativity, inspiration, and so-called talent. And I will use air quotes there because I think talent is made, not innate. It's a pretty long blog post, and I'll just let you read that on its own. So what I want to talk to you today is more about how to learn tarot in a creative but solid way, a way that's supported and yet remains open and curious enough to let you develop your skills as a tarot reader and not come out as a computer in the end. And as an inspirational quote, I will read the entry for the Magician here. In this book, each page gives you the slogan here, the slogan at the top, some keywords, a general meaning, an affirmation, and then a link to the company culture. So for this card, we have Manifest Your Destiny, which would be kind of a tarot interpretation, right? Try Not Why, which is the corporate slogan. The affirmation given is, I recognize my ability to manifest my goals through the skills I have within me. And the company link says, no experiment fails on paper, so we have to do it in reality. We try, we don't speculate about why. The more experiments we do, the more success we have. And that really is the heart, I think, of becoming a good tarot reader, developing your skills as a tarot reader, is this willingness to experiment and test out in the real world. Not by reading a zillion tarot books, not by collecting a zillion decks, but by actually sitting down and doing a lot of tarot readings. And I would say reading for others wherever possible. Now, that does not mean that you have to get paid to read. It doesn't mean that you have to formally create some kind of tarot business or anything like that. It can just be reading for friends and family, coworkers, etc. But really practicing tarot reading. And yes, you can practice it, with made-up questions and fake people. So as I'm talking, I'm going to lay out some more cards. The thing about reading tarot is that you really can't learn it from a book. You can learn some root words, some basic meanings, some correspondences. You can learn about tarot by reading a tarot book, but you can't learn to read tarot by reading a tarot book. You have to actually sit down and do it. And it's just the same with any other kind of creative skill that you might, admire in someone else. So if you want to learn to play a musical instrument, for example, yes, you're going to probably have some written music, at least for, most musical instruments. You're going to have some notation. So it's not like you're not going to have a book of music or something. But just buying sheet music is not going to help you learn how to play your instrument. You have to actually make noise with it, right? You have to use your body and get sound out of it. And whether that's pressing keys on a piano or blowing air into a woodwind or a brass instrument or banging on a drum, you just have to do it. There's no substitute for that. And so I see in friends of mine that are trying to learn tarot, they get a tarot deck and they read the guidebook, and then they maybe try like one reading or something, and then they feel stuck and stupid because they're looking at the guidebook and it's not making any sense, and so they read another tarot book and they like that tarot book, they get really inspired, and then they try reading and it's confusing again and they feel back to square one, like they didn't learn anything. and then they try a different book, and maybe this time they don't read it cover to cover, they just kind of dip in and out of it a little bit. Maybe they get a different tarot deck because they've heard that, oh, like, well, beginners shouldn't use animal decks because it's too confusing, so you should use a people deck. So then they don't like the Rider-Waite-Smith, so that they get something else. And then they read that little white book, or they read a different book, and it's still confusing, and etc. And they keep trying to fix it by buying more books. And it doesn't work out. And that's because they're not actually doing very many readings. They're doing maybe 1 or 2 readings per book they read. And they're watching tarot videos. They're watching other people read, which, you know, I loved doing when I was first learning tarot, and I still love doing. I learned things from that. But what I didn't learn from that was how to do a reading kind of start to finish, how to make the cards make sense, how to string them all together in one go, like I was watching other people do. You don't learn how to build a house by watching someone on YouTube build a house. My partner and I love to watch this guy in Italy build this house that he's been working on for a few years. He's actually like built part of it, and now he's working on another part. And I love watching him work, and I find it soothing. It's like wholesome, slow TV. You know, he's using all natural materials and stuff. But guess what? I don't have a house. I'm not building a house. I don't actually know how to build a house from watching him. And the same is true for learning how to play a musical instrument, and the same thing is true for tarot. You cannot learn tarot only by reading books, and you cannot learn tarot only by watching other people do it. You personally have to do it, and you have to get through being terrible at it and feeling very awkward about it and kind of not enjoying it because you're so terrible at it and it's so awkward, and feeling like your interpretations are wrong, and looking at the cards and your mind goes blank and you have no idea what anything is, and the 2 things you thought you remembered from the last time you did a tarot reading, you've already forgotten those as well. And that's where I think really intensive practice is helpful. So not, you know, doing a reading a week or a reading a month, or even doing like a single card draw once a day. I don't think any of that is intensive enough. And I actually think the 1 card a day thing is not helpful if you're just shuffling the cards and pulling a card, because you're not going to go through you're not going to see the whole deck for a really long time that way. I think sitting down and spending time with all of the cards, and Tom Benjamin has some great exercises for kind of going through the whole entire deck, and I'll link those below. So doing some of that kind of thing to familiarize yourself with the deck itself, and force yourself to look up meanings when you get stuck. You're like, what was the moon again? What was the King of Wands? You know, I felt okay about the rest of these, but I forget what that one's supposed to be. So having the book there as a resource to fill in the blanks, doing some kind of intensive exercises, but then also sitting down and doing readings and doing a whole bunch of them in one sitting. So putting out 3 cards and coming up with a question and then answering the question, and then changing the question and then answering that question with the same 3 cards, and then changing the question again and answering it again with those same 3 cards, and doing that 10, 20, 30 times in one sitting, right? And then maybe you keep the question the same and you change the cards, and you go through the whole deck. You keep the same question and you put out 3 cards and you come up with an answer, and then you know, let's say your deck is shuffled. You don't have to reshuffle it every time. You just take the next 3 cards out of the pile, answer the question again, take the next 3 cards, answer the question again, and repeat that until you get through all 78 cards. That kind of intensive practice is what's going to get you more fluid, more fluent, better able to, quote unquote, remember the meanings, even though, you know, we don't have set meanings, but we have maybe genres of ideas around certain cards or defaults that we can fall back on. And it's really that kind of intensive practice combined with a little bit of book learning, combined with watching an occasional video on a reading technique or something like that. I think the other thing that people fall into with that overconsumption of information about something is without having the experience of doing the readings yourself, you don't have context for a lot of the more subtle techniques or the extra information. So there's nothing to plug that into. If you don't have a strong foundation and you haven't had experience doing something, adding little trills, little improvisations onto something when you can barely get a note out of that guitar or out of that trumpet, it's not going to help you. You have to be able to play scales. You have to be able to tell the difference between a whole note and a half note. You have to have that foundational kind of knowledge and skill. And that takes a little bit of time to develop. And that's okay. It's okay to be a beginner. And it's okay to feel clumsy. Once you start doing this more, like let's say you set aside half an hour to do these really intensive practice sessions every day for 100 days. You're going to have a pretty good foundation at the end of that 100 days and that 50 hours of practice. So from there, then you can go out and get a different tarot book with a different perspective and slightly different associations. Or you can watch, a more experienced reader go through their process of reading, or look at different spreads or different types of layouts for cards and get ideas and slowly build your knowledge. And again, don't overconsume that fresh knowledge. Learn like one technique and then practice that for a week. And then learn one technique and practice that for a week. And incorporate it with the first technique and your foundational knowledge. I think you're going to have a much better time. I think you're going to receive results faster. I think you're going to be overall less frustrated and feel more accomplished if you layer in that learning and do a lot more practice. A lot more practice. That's the way to learn really anything, right? Think about learning how to ride a bike. Probably got some basic instruction. Put your feet here, grab the handlebars, steer left, right. But you didn't get like 1,000 pages on how to ride a bike. You got some very basics. And then you got someone running along next to you, pushing you, telling you to go pedal, 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 and then that's what you had to do. And you fell off and you got back on and you pedal, pedal, pedal. And you fell off and you got back on and you pedal, pedal, pedal. And eventually it starts to make sense and not feel so awkward. Right, and something like riding a bike or playing a musical instrument, you can start to feel the muscle memory building in your body and you can really feel it. I think with tarot, where you start to feel that is your intuition, and you're not having to like sit there and stare at the cards and kind of, what do these mean? Kind of gird your loins or whatever. You're like, okay, this is starting to flow a little bit, or maybe you understand one card and not the other two. That's great. That's progress. And it'll start to feel more natural. Not, again, based on memorizing necessarily, although in the beginning, it feels like memorizing. And different people learn different ways. For me, I needed a system. I needed to understand the numerology part. Some people they want just some keywords. However that goes for you in the beginning is fine. It's only through practice that applying that beginner knowledge can actually start to take root and help you. If you're just reading a bunch of books, then you're not becoming a tarot reader. You're becoming someone who knows a lot about tarot in theory. Okay, I think that's all I wanted to say. Thanks for joining me on this very weird walkthrough. Again, if you want a much longer rant about how to learn things, check out the blog post below, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.